Thank you, Michael. Thank you so much.
You could see it, so I can see it this way.
I still think I can put it here.
Doesn't it turn around?
But then I can't click.
Oh. Well, you can click.
I mean, I click, but I can't see. I mean, I could click from there.
It's not going to turn because it's lower than.
Oh, it's not set up to do that.
I wonder if this comes up.
Oh, no, it does.
So then I have to just look
But
up.
then you have to look up. Well, let's don't break it. By twos for the thing. That's pretty good.
So then I have to click.
Then you have to click from there. That would be good.
But you can see that anyway.
Yeah.
Right, but
they
you can put it down so that it's not in your face, or can you?
Oh, I don't mind. I can see where it is now. It's just a little disorienting to me. To you. I'm used to being there. I'm not used to looking up there, but I think I can handle it.
Look at a nice big giant monitor.
Huh?
I can't see you.
Oh, can you see that?
Yes.
I like that because I don't like to turn.
Right. Then I have to turn around and look and see, and then
Yeah,
there you
that's
are,
cool.
like this.
And that way, thank you, Tara.
Yeah, you feel like
Yes.
it's like you're doing a TED Talk or something.
Well, no. I would have to
Maybe
be
you got a pedal for your looping your music.
Yeah, really.
That's great. And then so that you know if I'm in the wrong place, you can just glare at me. This is really disconcerting, but I'll figure
You
it
get
out.
it again.
I'll figure it out.
You can pretend. Give it a try.
Oh, you know what? I gotta run upstairs and reprint something else because I forgot to print the one that has all my notes on it. So I will be back.
Yeah.
Don't wait for me to get
Don't
started.
wait for you. Okay.
Nope. I will just sneak my way back in here.
You're sitting over here.
I'm super glad that I
Tara,
went.
do you have any water in any of those things?
I don't. Do you want me to grab you something? Do you have yours at your desk?
On my desk is a yellow one, a tall yellow one. Could you bring
Yep.
water?
Yep.
I feel like we're the advanced team, and the president is going to come in and be like,
Right.
POTUS!
Right.
Because we're going.
DCA?
Oh, no, because I then over at that place over there, we had all what's the last time we had all IT?
A couple years ago.
It's kind of nice. I can't even remember it.
There's a lot of people here.
Not when?
He said, not this year.
That's
This year is for 2 months.
That's how it's like this 6 weeks into the year.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Right.
Let me see if I can.
You're gonna get Google that?
If it's green, it's good.
Probably should get gas.
All right. Alrighty. Good. I'm going to test this out. Can you hear me okay? Yes, good. Well, welcome everybody to the kickoff of our digital accessibility program. I see many, many faces that I recognize and a few that I don't. But I'm Tracy Massey, and I am the interim deputy CIO, and I have been overseeing the Multco Align program. Last weekend, I was holding a microphone singing karaoke, but on a girls' beach weekend, like in the confines of a house. So I'll spare you those details. But anyway, I'm really excited to be able to kick off this event and have everybody here to learn about accessibility. It is just the first step in sort of realizing our goals around and vision, where digital sites and apps and content is available to everybody, those with disabilities and not. I am eager to learn about it. I'm not overly familiar. I'm more familiar with some accessibility issues. A family member of mine, one of my brothers-in-law, I've known him since he was born. He just turned 34, and he was born with one hand. So I've watched him and helped him learn to use technology in different ways and finding the right keyboard, and watching him work with different phones as all of our phones have gotten smaller and then larger, and most recently talking with him about the reachability feature on iPhones that is useful for people who might have troubles that way. So that's more my experience, and so I'm eager to learn more about it. So you can go, Madeline. Today, the goal is just for everybody to gain a little bit of understanding about accessibility, and my Siri keeps turning on, and really make the case and understand this, which I'm just going to read, which says digital accessibility, which is essential for some people, is useful for all of us. That's a key point, and we want today, when you leave today, that everybody has kind of an understanding of that. Go ahead. Flip to the next one. So we are going to go over 4 points today. What is accessibility? Make the case for it, why it's important, what it means for you. Each of us has a role, depending on our various roles within the organization. We all have a role to move this forward. And then fourth, throughout today, we'll make clear what the next steps are related to the initiative. So the vision for this is that everybody has meaningful access to digital content. This is both employees and residents. That means access regardless of disability. It means reducing barriers, not putting up barriers to make things consciously or not more challenging to people, not perpetuating things that we have done historically just because that's how we know how to do it, but really moving us forward. And then really the vision is to embed this in how we work. Not that this is just the next thing that we're responsible for that we need to make happen, but that it becomes how we do our work. Almost like we don't even have to think about it. It's just how we do things. It's related to how we've talked about the Think Yes program, thinking about carbon reduction, just trying to work that into how we do our work day to day. That's the overall vision. So then, why now, and what's the case about this? There's really three easy reasons to think about this. It's the right thing, and it's the law, which we're going to talk about. It supports inclusion and equity, which is key to our organization, and it's just general good management. I think there's a video coming up.
Web accessibility perspectives. Keyboard compatibility. Not being able to use your computer because your mouse doesn't work is frustrating. Many people use only the keyboard to navigate websites, either through preference or circumstance. Whether it's temporarily limited mobility, a permanent physical disability, or simply a broken mouse, the result is the same. Websites and apps need to be operable by keyboard. Web accessibility. Essential for some, useful for all. Visit w3.org/WAI/perspectives for more information on keyboard compatibility.
I like that. It makes it, it's a clear, good example. So back to the reasons why we are doing this now. So the first one was good management. And by this, I think we really mean it aligns just with how we manage and how we do our work. It overlaps with things we're already working on, like usability, device independence, mobile web design and search, multimodal being able to, you're making a face, Madeline, I don't know if it's like crazy. Making sure that people can access things different ways, through voice control rather than typing in. It also benefits people without disabilities, so I am finding with my advancing age that my eyesight is getting worse and worse. So some of these things benefit me as well. And it just is allowing us to get ready for the future.
Web accessibility perspectives. Video captions. Video isn't just about pictures, it's also about sound. Without the audio, you'd have to guess what this film is about. Frustrating, isn't it? Not knowing what's going on. That's the situation for everyone who can't hear. Captions make videos accessible, which is also handy for people who want to watch video in loud environments, or where you need to be very, very quiet. Web accessibility, essential for some, useful for all. Visit w3.org/WAI/perspectives for more information on video captions.
If you've been to a board meeting, right, you see the captions running at the bottom. And sometimes when I'm on the treadmill at home, I use the captions at the bottom of the TV screen so I can read and understand what's going on in my programs, as my grandma used to say. So the second point is that, the second item here is it's right to do and it's the law. So I really just wanted us to all take a moment to read this. Hardships and barriers to accessibility create separate and potentially inequitable workplaces and services that are unethical and unlawful. I thought that that was just very powerful. Some related to that, we as an organization must follow laws and regulation and policies, which I'm going to talk through a few of them in just a minute. But most of all, as public servants, our role is not to expose the county to any kind of undue risk. So we need to make sure we're doing it for these legal reasons as well. Go ahead. So the first one is the Americans with Disabilities Act. Local governments must make services available to people with disabilities. We need to do that. The second one is an existing county procedure that's written right into what we should be doing. meaningful access to programs and activities and services for persons with limited English proficiency and persons with disabilities in accordance with federal, state, and local laws. So there it is, right in what we are accountable for doing. The United Nations has declared equal access is important, and equal opportunity is a human right. And I think the last one, or the third point, this is, for me, of the 3 reasons why now and why important, is that it's inclusive. And that's what we're working on in DCA as an organization. And it supports inclusion and equity. And it's just a real, for me, it's what connects me to this and makes me want to move this forward. So I think at this point in time I'm about to transition it over, but what we don't really know is how people with disabilities use computers and software. And I mean we as a DCA organization or as an IT organization. There are guidelines, there are videos and that sort of thing, but we're just learning. And so kicking off this initiative and dedicating resources to this will help us learn and understand and then figure out how we can improve. So I'm going to be turning this over to Emily Puri. Okay, all right, Puri? All right, she's going to come up here. Emily, you might recognize, she is a former DCHS employee and now is the Director of Independence for a company called, or an organization called Insight. And you've got your mic, right?
Hello? Okay, I'm on, yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm really excited to be here. I love coming back to the county. This is my 2nd time since I've left. So I was formerly with DCHS, Youth and Family Services, and I recently, September I think I left, I'd been involved with a lot of equity work here at the county, and I was doing a lot more speaking. I think quite a few have been to some of my presentations. And so I decided that I wanted to do more of that full-time versus boring contracts and budgeting, and so, which was my actual full-time job. So I started doing a lot more public speaking and talking about equity and being involved in the Workforce Equity Project here. And I said, okay, it was time to make that shift. So as a program specialist, I went out and about, and Insight is an organization that provides scholarships as well as opportunities, and I happened to get my job with Multnomah County through one of the Insight events. And so I went to them, I said, what's going on over there? What are you guys doing? They said, actually, this sounds like a great fit. So I am a person with a disability. I have a vision disability. I'm technically legally blind. I have sight still. This is my dog up here, Bevy. She is new to me, so if you guys haven't seen her, that's because she's new to me, 2 months-ish. My sight is not diminishing that quickly, which a lot of people see me now, and they're like, oh no. But depth perception is getting worse at this point in my progression, I just don't know. So having her for stairs, unfamiliar areas, curbs is really helpful. So that's why I have her, so don't be worried. One thing I will say as a disclaimer to this presentation, if you have questions throughout our time today, I have people in the audience spotting questions. If you raise hands, if you're more comfortable with that, that's fine. I'm not ignoring you, I just can't see your hands. So, but also feel free to interrupt me, yell out, hey, question, comment, anything like that. I will not be offended, I promise. Insight is, let's see, is that me? Where am I? Why did they put that up there? I didn't add my own picture, my marketing person made me. But the following slide. So Insight is an organization that focuses, the mission is to unlock the potential of people. It originated, the 2 founders, Scott Hatley and Vale Horton, are 2 men with disabilities, and they founded the organization, and it originally was unlocking the potential of people with disabilities. And it started as a scholarship program for people with disabilities getting into the education system, and it advanced. So we kind of have 3 buckets, if you will, of education. We do a ton of scholarships, 40 to 60 a year. And the exciting thing about our program is not just universities and colleges, but it's trade schools, it's a certificate program. Any way that we can get people with disabilities working or educated to eventually work is where we are passionate about it. Employment, we do a ton of job fairs. Multnomah County attends them quite a bit. And that is, since we have expanded our mission to experiencing barriers because we saw the intersection so much everywhere we went, that we wanted to help more people, especially veterans and people experiencing homelessness. What else do we do? Single parents. We prep our employers for the fact that somebody might be coming through with a kid in a stroller because they can't find daycare at the moment. So if you find a person, just it is what it is and move on and keep interviewing them, and they're just trying to get a job. So we prep our employers for that. We have more programs under each of these buckets, but I'm the director of independence, and so I manage our speaking co-op. So there's a bunch of us that do this kind of education, corporate conversations. My passion is to get into every corporate office population like all of you to get educated. A lot of people are really excited about hiring diverse populations, but if you get into the organization and they're not ready for us, it is hard, and that's what we're here today to talk about. So we do a lot of that. We're educating, and then the other exciting part of my job is the entrepreneurship program, and we basically take people with the passion, the drive, the motivation, the ideas to start their business, and they don't have the resources, or maybe they don't have the network, or maybe they don't know how to do the social media piece. However, we can support them. Our current caseload has mostly people with disabilities, but it's open to barriers. So we're always looking for new entrepreneurship programs to support. So it's really exciting to be where I'm at, and it's really exciting to be back here to talk to all you. So when we look at why I'm here, why am I here, and why is accessibility such a big topic right now? And it's because we are going more digital and digital every single day. And for a person with sight problems, it's incredible how fast that changes. I remember back in the day when I had an Android phone, and you'll see later, I use all my software, screens are inverted. So it's black background with white writing. And I remember when Android they had that as their normal. And then one software upgrade, and the white background was white, the letters were black, and I couldn't change it. There was no way to change that function back then. So I immediately go to Apple, and I say, I can't even use I went to Verizon and said, I can't even use my phone, what do I do? And they're like, well, I don't know. And so nobody knew how to do that, first of all. And this was, I don't know, 10 years ago, maybe? But that was my first experience with like, oh my gosh, how quickly this stuff changes is going to affect my life. And so I went to iPhone. They do all these amazing things because Apple's amazing. Even though I know a lot of you IT people are PC people. But so it affects everybody. And when Tara came to me, she says, you know, in IT, we're not all doing the same thing. We're not all doing the same job function, and that's something we need to look at. So my first question, I kind of want to get an idea of who's in the room. How many people are software, like developers, software people? And I can kind of see hands, so I'm not just totally, I can get rough ideas. How many people are hardware or like desktop services? And then data entry? Kind of like databases, management, that kind of stuff. And then I'm trying to think what other ones are. Web, there's web development. And then are there any like procurement people purchasing IT stuff in here? Okay, so the question is, who does this matter to? And it's everybody. How many of you work with people every day? How many of you work with software that people use? How many people develop the software that people use? And so the more we talk about these silly questions, I think accessibility is often thought of as, you don't think of people with disabilities. But 1 in 5 people report having a disability, which more likely it's about 1 in 3 people report or actually have disabilities. So if you are just asking yourself, I develop software for people, you can really get an idea of how many people you're actually touching when you think about accessibility. Help desk type positions. A lot of people, oh, I'm not developing software, I'm not looking at web content, I'm not doing all that piece. Therefore, I don't know. It may not, but it does, because I can't tell you how many times I called the help desk here at Multnomah County, and the best question ever, I'm like, hey, my Zoom text isn't working. I turned on my computer, I restarted it, I did all those things that I normally do. Can somebody help me? And they're like, okay, sure, I'm gonna send you the invite to remote in. And they're like, push the accept button. And I'm like, my Zoom text isn't working. I can't see the button. So it was like, oh, well, it's just right there. And then they say, oh, sometimes they said, just hit enter. Well, then the thing isn't always on the right button. They can say cancel or accept. So then it would cancel it. And they're like, well, I pushed it, and I can't tell if they're going on my computer. So then they're like, oh, I don't have access. And so it was this conversation. I'm like, my Zoom text isn't working, which means I cannot see the screen. Or they're like, can you go up to file? I mean, they're trying to give me a command. I'm like, no, my Zoom text isn't working, so I can't do these things. So it was, even at a help desk level, at a software level, at any kind of level, it does touch all of you in somewhere. In a records level, if you're entering data in a certain pattern, in a certain way, in certain fields, it's going to touch you in some respect. So I want you to take a minute and it's like literally a minute, and talk to the person next to you and just discuss the first time accessibility occurred to you in your job. Like, you may have to, or you either had a question, or it was a problem, or it was something. Just real quick, what that experience was and how it felt to you. And I'm gonna ask maybe 1 or 2 people to share. So go ahead, go. Let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Bring it back. I hate doing the clap, 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 clap. All right, go ahead and bring it back. Bring it back. Everybody. Okay. Simmering, simmering. Who's going to be the one brave person to share out kind of their experience quickly as to how it first affected you and how it felt when it did? Was it a positive experience or a negative experience? Who's going to go? Okay.
Long time ago, probably 20 years ago, when I first started in the county, I was supporting someone who had MS on the first floor of the Ford building, and he had one of those screen sticks that he had to use in his mouth, and
Oh, okay.
he couldn't use his arms, and I supported him, making sure that everything worked for almost 2 years, and he was pretty amazing. I actually learned from him, just in terms of support, that he just needed the tools he needed to do his job, but he didn't want to be treated any differently, and that was impressive to me.
Very cool. So it was overall a positive experience.
Oh yeah.
How many people?
Summarize that for the tape.
Oh, so the answer was somebody that was using had MS and used a mouth type apparatus control. I'm just repeating for the camera, everybody. And it was a really positive experience because the gentleman that needed the service was actually taught the employee a lot about what he needed. He didn't want to be treated differently. He just needed the tools he needed, and he could move on with his life and his job. And it was a successful and very positive experience for everybody. So that's great. And that's a perfect example. Overall, just by a show of hands, everybody's first experience, whose was positive? And whose experience felt kind of yucky and maybe embarrassing at times or kind of shameful? And that's most likely because the systems and the programs and everything were not in place and were not designed for accessibility. So the person who's responsible for it, especially IT, now feels like, deer in the headlights, what do we do? Oh my gosh, this isn't accessible and this person can't do their job because of what, maybe not what you did, but now it's something that IT did that now you're responsible for. So it's very common to have a negative kind of feeling about that. Okay, who's gonna be a very, very brave soul and be a volunteer up here? Anybody? Brave soul. We're gonna do a demo. It's gonna be fairly easy, I promise. A brave soul. Okay, I just need to. Yay!
Right on.
Let's see if I can type my password sideways. Okay.
Hold on.
So,
Let's get this up.
once the projector comes on,
Okay, yeah.
here's what we're gonna do. I have my computer. Whoa, why is it at that? Is that something else? Should be on the Google. Oh, let's go up here. Should just be on the Open tab. For once, I can do something that maybe you guys can't. Okay, where are my Open tabs? Hold on. Is that just Google?
That one's IT accessibility.
You're on the guest network confirmation.
Oh. Oh, gotcha. Okay. Come on.
Start that. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Okay, so is this just Google now? What are we on over here? You wanna?
It's still captiveapple.com. That's what it's saying.
I just need to close this out.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, if you want to close that out.
Want me to
This
close
is your
that?
first test.
It's my first test.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a
The
Mac.
far
I don't know
left.
what- I
Oh, you
know
don't know
what to do with
Mac.
the
Oh,
I'm
good.
sorry.
Okay. And then you're going to go to the Open tab that's just Google on the far right.
The new tab right there?
Yeah.
Up there?
Yep.
There you go.
Okay,
I think we're
so
there.
now it's even better that you don't know how to use a Mac, so you can't cheat. Okay, so this is how I use my computer on a daily basis. You can go ahead and turn it.
Yep.
So I'm going to have you go ahead and navigate to a website.
Yep.
So you can use the mouse and go.
Anyone?
Huh?
Anyone?
No, so you're going to go to Insight, INCIGHT.org.
I know. Hey, we're almost done. Right there.
And you do have to push on the trackpad. Yeah. NCIGHT.org.
Okay. I'm going to guess that worked.
You have to find out. Go find out. This is your work day. This is your assignment right now.
Okay.
And then you're going to go to the. Oh.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
So we may not even get through this whole demo, but it definitely shows you the point. So you're going to try to find the top thing that says services.
Woo. Yep, got it.
Okay, click on that.
That was luck.
And then you're going to go to Speakers Co-op.
Okay.
And you're going to go down to, let's see, what are we going to do? Click on Speakers. Are you there, Speakers? Where are you? Uh-oh.
Speakers. Speakers?
Speakers.
Okay, yeah.
Let's see if we can find me.
I've got Emily P. Can I go with Emily P?
That works. Well, you got it. You can move the screen if you just tap it over. Like move your mouse. Let's see how it goes.
Oh, there we go. Now
There we go. Okay, click on Emily Purry. Yep. And now I want you to look through that web page and find out what topics I focus on.
Okay. Click is killing me. Okay.
So
Life
as he's-
strategist and educator, you said topics that you
Topics.
focus? Okay.
While he's looking, the one thing you'll notice is the pictures don't invert. That's one thing, and I don't know the behind-the-scenes IT world. That's one thing that's starting to do automatically. People are doing it. I don't know how, but like on Facebook. So since I'm always inverted, Facebook will now invert the picture so it looks normal. And so either way I look at it, the picture looks normal. Versus I think here I look like a ghost. It's all white. And so that's one of the accessibility things that's new that I don't know you can keep in mind. Okay, did you find it?
Equity, intersectionality, culture change. Those are
Those are 3, yep, good. Okay, let me do chime tech before I give you more tasks. Okay, that's that's all we're gonna do. I was gonna make him submit a form, but that will be really funny. So thank you for your time. Yay!
Are you done with this?
Yeah, we're done with that. You can just close it or whatever. So the demonstration is this. If I show up to work and my Zoom text or whatever wasn't working that day, this made it difficult for him to navigate. It could be difficult, and I could probably get through it maybe by sitting like this close to my screen, having a total migraine at the end of the day. I could probably get through it. But if I have what I need, or if I could have told him the commands to make that smaller, he could have just boop, 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 boop. You give me the tools to do what I can do. If it's accessible, if the accessibility thought is there, that's a huge part of how it can affect our lives as people with disabilities. Screen readers are the other huge things, and that's for all different reasons, whether it's sight, whether it's mouse control, whether it's, there's a ton of different reasons. Dyslexia is a huge one that people are using more voiceover and readout for. They can move faster when they hear it, audio. At this point, because my vision is progressive, I have the whole spectrum. I used to read normal textbooks when I was in high school and part of college-ish, and I had access to my books on tape, cassette tapes, yeah, that's right. But I never used them. I said, nope, not doing it. But now, I can't live without it. I can't even, I was just telling Tara at the beginning of this, I sit here and write my notes, but I can't read it really unless I sit here for 10 minutes trying to squint at my notes. But it just shows that if the accessibility thoughts are there, if we're looking at different programs, trainings, and all that with the thought of accessibility, it makes it so much easier for somebody trying to go to their desk that day and just do their job versus something like this, which would be the opposite for all of you. If I said all of you have to function like that all day tomorrow, how productive would you be? And would you go home either throwing up, which is how I used to be when I started using the Zoom, is I just got seasick. I was just like, oh, like you just get so disoriented until you get used to it. But if that's the way you had to function, how frustrated and how just at a disadvantage would you be? And so that's where you have to kind of think of accessibility. We have to keep zooming because we go fast. Okay, so the rest of today, the rest of the few minutes here is talking just about discussions around my experience here at the county and some of the things I'm noticing now. So we can just leave it there for a while. So the trainings at Multnomah County, a lot of people here would not take optional training, me included, prior to, I would say about a year or two ago. When I first started here, I definitely wasn't comfortable stepping up and saying, hey, this training's not accessible, and I need it to do my job, but, or I would be more productive and more efficient in my position if I had this training, but because it's offered on computer, because it's offered only in the computer lab, I never took them. I never took advantage of them, and I actually had people tell me, don't ask for accommodations because you're not through probation. That's a huge problem. It wasn't until probably, 3 years ago, Tara, 2 years ago maybe, I finally started reaching out. I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. I need to take some trainings. And so Tara, and then Ann Barry was also one of the first ones that started doing the Hangouts with me, so I could be at my desk with my accommodations that I had set up, and I could be on conference call. It wasn't the best system all the time. A lot of times I couldn't talk to them, and they couldn't talk to me, and I couldn't really interact. And it was kind of weird when I did, because all of a sudden this voice of God would come out of nowhere, and I was like, I know, and then like, oh wait, Emily, I forgot about you. And so it wasn't the best system, but at least I felt comfortable to try. And at least a few people in the county were willing to. A lot of people said, no, we can't. I was like, I just need the information. I'll figure it out. Give me the information and I'll figure it out. So accessible trainings, the knowledge base around, one more thing about trainings, and this is a big one. A lot of people are developing platforms for learning. And I know Workday has some of that integrated in. So with my current system with a Mac, I highlight everything on the page. And then I push my command and it reads out to me. I still have enough sight to highlight and command because I can't stand how much it talks to me with the whole screen reader setup. It talks way too much. I have 3 kids, they talk enough. So I just highlight what I need to know. I don't need to know every information on the page. So I still am able to use that command and that setup, but eventually I may not be able to, not sure. But a lot of these curriculum-based trainings, you can't highlight what's being said, and there's no audio button. So then that training I can't necessarily, well, quickly or easily engage with, especially if it's a timed thing where they're going slide to slide. If I can't highlight it, I can't see what the content is, and I can't answer the questions. And then there was the same thing with the HIPAA training that was here at the county. I don't know how it's been changed since Workday, but it wouldn't read out with screen readers, and so we couldn't interact with it. So trainings are huge, being able to just think about when you're developing trainings, developing software, to have that knowledge, to have that understanding. Then with the knowledge of the people, as I said at the help desk, knowing, okay, we do have Zoom text, maybe I could play around with it a little bit. Maybe I could see like what they see, what they talk with. Maybe one of the laptops, I know my old laptop somewhere around here with Zoom text on it. So even just being able to experience that, and maybe talking to the team about, hey, can I experience it? Do we have that software available that I can try? Just being curious about the knowledge around accessibility. The trends are changing so fast that it's hard to keep up with, just like technology of all sorts, but the number of softwares and accessibility that is out there for us is awesome and overwhelming. And then the last thing is being part of the solutions for all of you. One of the things I've talked to Tara and her team about are, when I was going through this big transition, what happened with me is I had Zoom text, everything I could highlight and push my command and it would read out, and I was on a PC primarily. Zoom text and JAWS, two vision or screen reader softwares, merged. And when they merged, they took away the ability for whatever cheat way I did it, they took that away from me. And so in the middle of my workday, in the middle of my workload, with all the things going on, I couldn't function. I didn't know how to then use the software because there's multiple ways to use it. I got the training. We had a guy come down 2 or 3 times to help train me. But in the midst of my workday, unless I could take a month off and have that be my sole duty, would be learning new key commands, learning new software, learning this and learning that, without any deadlines, without any pressure and all that. I found a cheat. I found a cheat to figure it out, but I was getting migraines, I was getting headaches because I was squinting so much and straining so much. So the thing they asked me, my department was extremely supportive. They said, hey, what can we do? We will buy anything. We will fix anything. We will do anything. Just tell us what we need to do. And I was like, I don't know. I have no idea. Like, I don't know. I know a Mac works. I, at that point, had brought in my personal Mac to try to figure out how can I get my work done on a daily basis. But I would say 80% of my job was in SAP. SAPs and Macs don't work together. So I can't do that. So then I had 2 computers set up. And one was Zoom text that I could do it without the screen reader because it was mostly numbers, and so it kind of worked. But then I had 2 setups, and we made a workaround, and it worked. But I didn't know what I needed. And I couldn't just tell my department, hey, go buy a $3,500 computer, and I don't know if it's going to work. Like, how much pressure does that put on me to come up with the right solution? And that's really hard. I would have said anything if I knew, but then I didn't know what programs that I use didn't work with a Mac because I never worked with a Mac at the county. So like, what was going to be compatible, what wasn't going to be compatible, I didn't have those answers. And so being able to provide some of the solutions for the person in that situation is huge. And I know people are working on resource lists and whatnot. Also knowing what's already in the county. I didn't know if anybody else was sight impaired until I talked to some of the desktop folks, and they said, oh yes, there's so-and-so over here and so-and-so over here and so on. Oh, okay, so what are we doing? Like, what are they doing? How are we fixing this? So just knowing what the county has as far as resources is huge. And that also goes along with the management staff. If the managers have some education around people with disabilities, accessibility, like, hey, here's just an FYI, if you have a sight-impaired person on your staff, these are the 3 programs we use. You don't have to understand how to use them, but at least you know they're available. Sign language interpreters, this is the company we use. This is the best success rate with closed captioning. This is what we're using. So just having some kind of resources available for management so that if I don't call IT and I say, hey, boss, what do I do? And they're like, oh, I mean, I don't know. What did you do in the past? And it's like, no, I'm just trying to do my job. So just having those resources available to management is also super important. I'm zooming along because I know we're getting close. Okay, so next slide. So where do we start? And this is like the most overwhelming question, especially for IT. Where do you start? Let's all admit it, we're all behind the curve. But that's not a bad thing. It's normal. I just had another conversation with an organization. They're like, I called somebody else, and they shamed me so horribly for being so behind that I couldn't work with them because I felt like I was going to cry at the end of the conversation. No, we're here, we're now. What can you do? The first point up here is incredibly,
Oh, that's just your, sorry.
It's powerful in both ways. What you do, what IT does, which is all of you, will affect people in a positive and or negative light. It will. There's no way around it. And that's awesome because you can create some amazing things. You can create, I mean, the apps that I have that I can call and say, hey, I lost my dog or something. Can you find her for me? And they use my camera and find her wherever she is. Or, I mean, the technology is incredible. The opportunity we have to help people through accessibility is incredible. And it's also extremely detrimental if we don't start looking at it from the beginning of the processes, especially like the procurement processes, from the development processes. What you create, what you build from the beginning, it's better to start with accessibility because when you have to go back and refix it all to make it accessible, it's a lot more work, it's a lot more time. And honestly, for us as people with disabilities, it gives people a really bad taste in their mouth. They're like, I just put all 6 months or however long into building this thing, and then the first person with a vision impairment came and just said, I can't use it, and it sucks, and I'm angry, and I'm mad, and now all my work is crap. And that happens, and then it leaves them mad because it didn't go over as well as we all wanted it to, and they just put a ton of effort into it. And so we think of, if we start thinking of those processes at the beginning of these conversations, at the beginning of these purchases, like Workday, it was terrifying for me. I said, oh my God, we are going all to this Workday thing, putting our life, our love, our religion into this Workday thing. Is it accessible? Is it going to be accessible to screen readers? Am I going to be able to use it? Good thing it all got delayed till after I was here. I left, but no. But the question is, like, when we were spending $1 million, I don't know how many it was, zillions, let's say, just for fun, on this system. I know it's going to be too late if I am just thinking about it now. I know the money has already been shelled out way before the information got to me. But if I'm the only one that is thinking about screen readers or accessibility, we're already too deep by the time we get there. So thinking about that stuff beforehand. And the last thing is, yeah, so just making sure that it's a thought. Even just the thought of accessibility will help us if it's a thought. We can go to the next slide, that's fine. So hopefully you're not all totally overwhelmed. But where do we start still? Again, I say the thought. The thought of accessibility, even if it's a thought, like it says up here, it's kind of a cheesy quote, but I still love it. Thoughts are education. We're educating all of you right now. I'm sure this is not the first accessibility conversation that many of you have had, and maybe it is. But the education starts provoking thoughts. Okay, what would I do if Emily came to me and I had to X, Y, and Z? That's starting that thought process. Then it turns into beliefs. I know I need to do this. I don't know how, I don't know where, I don't know where I fit into this puzzle, but those beliefs will come out, which will turn into actions. And if it's not actions that you can control, at least you're prepared. I know there are plenty of people on this team, and I won't call anybody out, but that figured it out with me. They came to the desk, they used my Zoom text, they figured out the commands. So when they came to my desktop, I didn't even have to minimize the screen. They're like, oh yeah, I got this, whoop, 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 whoop. And it was amazing because I didn't have to feel like a total inconvenience. I didn't have to feel like, And it didn't take them as long to help me get back to working my full-time job. It was an easy fix. It was only a few people that had that ability, but the fact that they had that knowledge and that experience, it was huge. So taking the time, having the understanding, and just moving forward. I think the fact that IT is making this huge effort and doing this thing today is awesome. So, are there any questions? I will hang out till the very end if you have questions later, but any questions right now that you want the group to hear? Yell them out or raise hands, I don't care.
Emily, on the screen, it says do a 1 to 2 minute parent share.
Oh, yeah.
I think if we do that, people might end up with some questions.
Do we have time?
You got a minute or so. I mean,
Okay.
I think it's worth at least doing the
Okay.
parent share.
Absolutely. So I want you to just turn to your neighbor and not just my awesome presentation, but no. Does accessibility, does this information, even the videos earlier, has it impacted you already and started thinking about your particular work situation? Just pair up, and then I'll have a few people share out, and then if that provokes any thoughts, questions, we'll go from there. So just pair up, and we'll go from there.
We're not going to have a lot of time for sharing.
Okay. Hey, stay.
Maybe I'll go up and stand up there with you so we can transition. No, I don't have.
We did start 5 minutes late, so. Let's bring it back together.
Is my mic working too? I'm testing and bringing everybody back all at one time.
Bring it back together.
We're multitasking here. Testing the microphone and calling everybody back. Wrapping up those conversations.
All right, bring it back together, everybody. Maybe one share?
Yeah, we can do one share.
All right, so we'll do one share out. We're cruising along the agenda here. It's packed full of good stuff. Who wants to share about if and how it impacted or provoked some thought out of your area?
So what is it that makes a screen reader work or not work? Does anybody know what kind of technical part of that would be?
There's a lot to it, and it depends on if you're talking about software, if you're talking about web, and I believe there's going to be some hints or education around maybe?
So yeah, we're not going to be training in details right now, but we'll talk about what to look for, and hopefully it'll give you some ideas of some of the places where things might be maybe not working together, because a lot of times it's just systems is not working together, right? And you just have to figure out how to set their settings so they work together.
I was just thinking in terms of my limits, so I just don't.
Yeah.
Great.
A lot of it's headings, a lot of it's, organizing information in particular ways. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Tara to talk about digital accessibility. And like I said, I'll hang out till the end. So
thank you so much, Emma. Thank you. All right. I don't know if my microphone is working. Is it working? Nope. In the back of the room, it appears to be working. So, all right, hopefully I won't be just shouting and breaking everybody's eardrum. Hello, everyone. My name is Tara Bowen-Biggs. I work for the web team, and I've been working in the past couple of years on trying to learn more about digital accessibility, building up to this day where we would all come together on this fantastic journey to figure out how we at the county can do our work and be more accessible. So from what we've already heard today, I'm hoping that at one point, one of these questions may have crossed your head, crossed through your mind. How will I recognize what is accessible, and how can I have an impact? Because that's what I'm going to be talking about. So if you have some other thoughts in your head, these are the ones I'm going to be talking about, and we can talk about the other ones later. Emily stole my introduction. I was going to do the who all does this, who all does that, and everybody was going to, at the end, have their hands raised, and I was going to go, congratulations, we can all make an impact on accessibility. So we just fast forwarded through that part. I want to give you a few expectations on the talk today. We're going to have a little bit of talk about some official guidelines that are in place that are going to kind of, guide us in our learning and understanding about accessibility. The meat of what I'm going to talk about today is talking about the principles of digital accessibility and providing examples. Examples is the really fun part. Let's see. So fortunately, we have guidance in the form of published standards and guidelines. The guidelines are based on some basic principles that we're going to go into, and then we'll have examples. But first, let's go with some background and definitions so that you can know that what guides the work that we're doing here actually is in place outside of the county, so that you can trust the work that we're doing right now that we're embarking on is within an established framework outside of us. So we're not just making this all up, we're using established, internationally recognized standards. So I'm going to see if I can use, yeah, I'm going to click, hopefully. Oops. Okay, so this is hopefully the most boring slide we're going to have today. And this is a list of the regulations that guide our work of digital accessibility. So first of all, there are some very clear guidelines for digital accessibility. They are called by the lovely name of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, otherwise known as WCAG. That's how I say it. People say it in different ways. That's how I'm going to say it. The WCAG guidelines first appeared in 1999 as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 1.0. So they were originally established as web guidelines. That's where they were based out of. But the latest iteration, which is now WCAG 2.1, just came out in June of 2018. It specifically mentions that all of these guidelines apply to non-web information and communications technology. So all of the things that we're going to talk about today apply to websites, but also web applications and other applications that may not be connected to the web. In general, what we're trying to do is come up with a common understandings and set of standards for any kind of thing that you interact with digitally. Same guidelines, everybody's going to follow them. The guidelines address things like images and video must have text alternatives. Text colors must meet certain contrast levels. Form elements must be properly labeled. They're very specific. These guidelines have different levels of conformance. There's A, AA, and AAA. As a local government, we're going to aim for AA conformance. I'm not going to go into detail on these guidelines because hopefully this is just the first step in a very long journey, and we'll be able to learn more about the guidelines that are specific to the different work that we do, because like Emily said, we do very different things. The IT is we have a very diverse set of jobs that we do. So you may become more familiar with one part of the guidelines than the other. So I'm not going to go deeply into those. Let's see. So for now, just know that they exist, and then that we're going to use to determine if our products and services are technically in conformance. And by the way, these guidelines are the guidelines that can be used in litigation. If somebody were to decide that what we are doing is not accessible, they would point to the guidelines and say they are not conforming with these guidelines. And in the last few years, a lot of institutions of higher education have been sued for this. That's not to scare us. I mean, we're taking the right step, trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing. But nobody is safe from people who are trying to use our sites and trying to get information from our sites. Just the other day, I read an article about how Beyonce is being sued because her website does not have captions. So it's things like the WCAG guidelines that people will point to when they say you're not conforming. Okay, so that's about all I'm going to talk about the guidelines right now. What I'm really going to focus on for most of the time is the principles of accessibility. The web content guidelines are based on these different accessibility principles. The accessibility principles can be remembered by the acronym of POUR. They stand for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And we're going to go into those in some detail. But I'm going to take a break for a minute and let Alistair Duggan, who's the head of accessibility at the Government Digital Services for the UK, I'm going to let him explain these principles. I think he does a really good job and does it in a much more succinct way than I would. Can you press the, there we go.
For a digital service to be accessible, there are 4 things that need to happen. So somebody needs to be able to perceive the content. That means that that content is available to at least one of their senses. So if you have a visual impairment, can you see it because you can make it large enough? Is there good color contrast? If you're blind, does your screen reader work with the content and read it out to you? If you're deaf, and there's some audio, is there a text representation that you can read instead of listen to? The other thing that needs to happen is that somebody needs to be able to operate the website or the interface. So not everybody uses a mouse. Some people may have a mobility impairment that means that they're forced to use a keyboard, or may use speech recognition software. If a service doesn't work with the input device that somebody is using, they're not going to be able to go to the page that they want to go to or submit the information that they need to submit. You also need to be able to understand the content. So it's all very well you receiving that content, but if you can't understand it, then you won't be able to do what you need to do. So people have a range of cognitive abilities. Some people may struggle to read due to dyslexia, maybe on the autistic spectrum. Using things like clear and simple language that is easy to understand, making sure that interfaces are consistent and predictable are really important to making sure that somebody can understand the content and how to use your service. The last bit is that it needs to be robust, and that means that it's been built in such a way that it's compatible with the technologies that people are using. So if somebody is using a screen reader, does it work with that screen reader? If somebody is using an older browser, does it work with that older browser? If any one of those 4 things don't work, then somebody won't be able to have a successful interaction and complete the task that they're trying to do.
Okay, thank you, Alistair. Uh-oh, I lost control. Ah, there we go. All right, so this is a review of the 4 principles of accessibility. Perceivable, you have to know something is there. Operable, you have to be able to take action. Understandable, you have to understand what it means. And robust, it has to be compatible with the technology you're using. We'll go into a little bit more details on these. It took me quite a while to remember what all of these are and everything, so don't expect to walk away today knowing all of them, but it's something that you can refer to, and it's something to know that these are the principles of accessibility. So if we are trying to achieve all of these things with our things that we build and support and purchase and maintain, then we will be working towards achieving accessibility. Okay, so one example, we're going to start with perceivable. And one example of making something perceivable is providing text alternatives for images. So a good example of this is the use of images. One of the WCAG standards states that images must have text alternatives. That is because you can't always assume that someone sees the image. So this is an image, a screenshot I took yesterday of the front page of the county home website. There's a number of circumstances under which you might not be able to see the site. You could be on the site, but you might not be able to see it. One is a person who is blind. Another is that someone might have a cognitive or focus issue and they turn off the images, which is what some people do in their browsers. They'll make it so the images aren't popping up all the time. Someone could also be using a hands-free digital assistant like Siri in their car, and the page is being read to them. So any of these circumstances would lead to this really pretty big, beautiful image not being displayed. So the guidelines tell us that if you use images to convey information, you need to make sure that you provide a text alternative. So I have a plugin on my browser where I can turn off the images on the page. So as you can see, this is what it looks like. This allows me to quickly check and see if images have been coded to include what's called alt text. And you can see here, ooh, let's see if I can get this to work. That's not working. Okay. Right under the there's a banner at the top that says normal hours, and right underneath it there's a sentence, and that sentence says, portraits from the Albina Queen photo exhibition were hung on display on the walls of the Multnomah County boardroom. So if you remember, that's what it looked like. And this is what it looks like without the image, and it includes alternative text. So excellent, good job. That whoever built that page wrote some alternative text that showed us what the photo was saying. Here is another example from the county website. This is a page from the Transportation Division about a road improvement project in East Multnomah County. This page provides all sorts of information about the 238th Drive Improvement Project, if you haven't all been out there to see it. There's a lot of good information on this page, including some images. So there is an aerial view, there's an aerial photo of the area, and then next to that there is a drawing, and the drawing shows a view of what the finished product is supposed to look like. So I did the same thing. I turned off the images to see how it would look. So this page actually shows two different ways that the principles of perceivable are being met. Whoever made this page did a good job of ensuring that there is a text alternative to the images. So what you see over here where it says project information, it says 238th Drive project area map where the image would be, but the image is not there. And remember, it was an image that showed the project area. So in the text, right underneath it says project information location, it says 238th Drive between Arata and Oregon Street. And then it has a link to a map, so you can locate it on a map. So they did a good job. They provided the text in the body of the page. So even if that image didn't show up, they know where they're talking about. Now the other one, under design concepts, they do it a slightly different way. So the paragraph under design concepts talks about how they selected the design for the road. And then underneath it, where the image used to be, it says, proposed cross-section of redesigned street, showing 3 lanes with separated paths on both sides and landscaping. So it's a description of what the picture is that they're not able to see. So whoever made this page did a really good job of making sure there are text alternatives, but they're not the only person who is responsible for making sure that this content was, that you could perceive this content. Here are some of the decisions that were made along the way that led to this. So the content management system that the county website is made on, Drupal, has alt text descriptions built into their media modules. So when we chose that platform, we chose it because we knew there were built-in accessibility features. Our developers made styles and did any further development making sure that it didn't conflict with the built-in accessibility features. So that was an important step. The person who made the page, we talked about, they did a good job. And then what I just did was I tested it to make sure that all the things that we think were in place actually worked. So a whole bunch of us actually are responsible for making sure that that page was accessible. So as I'm talking about the rest of the things I'm talking about today, I challenge you all to think about ways that you might intersect with some of this. You might not all be, have been a part of this, but if you're a project manager, if you're a BSA, somebody who's, somebody who gathers requirements, somebody who budgets, somebody who reviews software to decide whether or not we want to have it here at the county, you all have an impact on the decisions that get made. Let's see, I'm gonna move on. So yeah, this is just kind of a list of some of the people who were involved in the process of making sure this page was perceivable. The steering committee who chose Drupal in the first place, the BSAs who got the requirements, and in that requirements there was a requirement that the site be accessible. Again, the developers and the designers who made sure that they didn't do anything that broke the built-in accessibility features, testers who made sure it all worked, and then finally the content creators. So another part of making sure that things are perceivable, we talked a little bit about captions and transcriptions. I'm glad you brought up Workday. That's a really great example. When we purchase products, when we maintain products, configure products, we have to make sure that the video players all have the ability to display captions, and then the people who make the videos have to make sure that they have captions. It's a shared responsibility again. So like if Workday didn't allow us to show the captions, it wouldn't be accessible, and that would be a problem. But they do, which is awesome. Okay, one final thought about color. Another requirement to making things perceivable is to make sure that you don't use color alone to convey meaning. So this is an example that I stole from a training that I went to, which was it just made everything so clear to me. So I'm going to share it with you. Here's how it goes. So you've won the lottery. Press the green button to accept the prize and the red button to decline. Awesome, right? So a lot of people have color blindness, where it makes it really hard to discern the difference between red and green. And so for them, it might look like this, which is a lot harder to figure out which button to press in order to collect your prize. So there is a way to remediate that, and all you have to do is put labels on them. So that's about as far as we're going to get into problem solving today, but that was a really great example that seems to resonate with a lot of folks. So to summarize about perceivable, here's some examples of some things that's perceivable. The images have text alternatives, videos have captions, you use sufficient contrast. You know, sometimes there's all these new websites out there that have like really light text and you like can't even see it. And don't use only color to convey meaning. Those are some examples of how we can meet the perceivable principle. So we're going to move on to operable. So remember, perceivable means you know it's there, and operable means you can take action. And one of the things that's important to remember is that there needs to be multiple ways for you to move around an application. Not everybody uses a mouse. Scrolling up and down the page is operating the content. Opening and closing a menu, and this applies again to non-web-based applications. Filling out or submitting a form. If you work on an application that's just filling out forms, you have to make sure that those work as well, that people can get into those fields to fill out those forms. When we think about getting around on a computer, we frequently think about a mouse or a trackpad. Not everyone uses a mouse. Some people might use only their keyboard. Some might use speech recognition. In either case, we need to build and support and maintain things that can be accessed in multiple ways. So this is I think it'll start, okay. This is a little screenshot that I did of me testing out Workday. I wanted to find out if I could use the keyboard to navigate through the main navigation at the top. And as you can see, what happens is I key through it, the little blue outline shows where I am in the page. When I get to the cloud icon up in the corner, which is my profile, I selected, and then it opened just like it was supposed to, and then I was able to navigate down it. To get an idea of how to make, whether or not your stuff is operable, unplug your mouse for a while, and then try to get around. And don't forget to disable your trackpad too. I've had my trackpad disabled inadvertently by my cat walking across it. So I've learned how to do a few things. It's not easy, but once you get the hang of it, it's a good way to do like a super high level check. Just tab through, make sure that when you press enter, things happen, and make sure that that focus is highlighted. Oops. Went too far. Okay. I went like 10 slides. That was weird. Okay, here's some things to do to, again, check to make sure things are operable. Unplug your mouse occasionally. Make sure that when you tab through, things are going in a logical order, because sometimes they could hop all over the place. Or if somebody is calling you because they can't figure out how to get somewhere, you could talk to them about what's the order of how things are moving through. Make sure that if you design a pop-up or there's a pop-up in the thing that you're configuring, you can get out of it without having to use a mouse. Sometimes things pop up and you're stuck. And then make sure touch targets are appropriate size. help others learn. These are all things that you don't necessarily have to be a developer. You may come across these things when somebody says, I want to buy this software for my program. So you can take out this list and ask yourself, okay, are people going to be able to get around in it? You can do some really preliminary checks yourself. Okay, let's see. You can do enough, you can learn enough about keyboard navigation, do high-level tests, even if you do use a mouse. Okay, blah, blah. So we don't have to be building the technology to help people. We can learn more about the systems and settings and accessories that help people who may be struggling getting around and operating the technology. So like Emily was saying, spend a little time learning about the keyboard shortcuts. There are some great keyboard. When I discovered the control zoom so I could make my text bigger, it changed my life. So I didn't have to get my mouse and get up in there. But spend a little time learning about those things. Help learn more about the accessories. We do have adaptive mouses and adaptive keyboards. Try some of those out, learn how they work with some of the different things. Oh, I skipped ahead. And then share it. One of the things that we are working on for the future within our division is a better process to help people who need to get adaptive technology. We don't have the process. There is no official process right now, and we want to figure out how to have one so that we can learn, so that we can be prepared when somebody calls up and says, I can't use this anymore. So while we're waiting for that process, because you know we don't work at great speed, lightning speed around here, do some experimenting, do some exploring, find out what works and document it, and we'll figure out where we can put all that information. All right, the last of the 4 principles of digital accessibility is, no, sorry, this is the third, is that it needs to be understandable. The principle of understandable means that a user knows what to do. They can follow the directions or patterns and find the information that they need to complete the task. A lot of things that we've already discussed come down to people who have specific roles here at the county. Developers and designers coding things correctly, like keyboard focus or choosing good contrast. They depend on testers knowing what to look for, like things like going in logical tab order, being able to enter text into fields. We call on business analysts and project managers to pay attention to accessibility in all phases of a project, from requirements gathering to budgeting to making sure that there's time for testing. And we've also seen the help desk and desktop folks who interact with our customers, who help people learn about settings and accessories and that interact with our systems. So those things are kind of, sort of in this department, sort of in this department, sort of in this department. Making things understandable are basically everyone's job. And one of the most useful things that we can learn is how to write in plain language. If you do documentation, if you put labels on buttons, if you add help text to forms, if you write emails, you are communicating, and you're communicating digitally. And so we need to make sure that that information is accessible. So plain language is your best friend. It is actually it's a thing. It's called plain language. In 2010, Obama passed a Plain Writing Act at a federal level, and they defined what plain language is because they wanted people to understand, what the federal government is telling them. Imagine that. So plain language, the characteristics of it are you avoid extra words, unnecessary adverbs, redundant phrases. You're clear and direct. You avoid acronyms. You use active voice. You don't use fancy or funny names for things. These are all things that when you are creating text for, again, like if you're helping people help fill in forms and stuff, you can apply all of these things. A couple other things to help make things understandable that you can do in all of your writing that you do. Time out. Am I done?
You're getting close.
Okay.
You're actually.
Oh, okay. I'm going to finish up then. Are to use headings when you write. This is an example of different headings used correctly to make it easy to scan the page. And then this is a little screenshot I did of, because it doesn't apply just to web pages. It applies to any documents that we make. Using headings is going to make it easier for people to understand it. People with screen readers can easily tab through the different sections of the page. And if you do it in Google Docs, it'll also automatically create a little outline for you on the side. Help users avoid mistakes. Make sure that if somebody hits an error message, that the focus is where the error is. I watched somebody test a very well-known application the other day using a screen reader, and there were 3 errors, and he never was able to see them because it was out of focus. So he kept submit, 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 and it never submitted because it never told him that he had an error. They are telling me to wrap up. So I will tell the last thing is robust. Robust means it works on multiple devices and platforms and is ready for the future. The Google search engine is an excellent example of something that is robust. When they first made it in the late 90s, it was just to find stuff on the web. And that was great and that was useful. But then people started to be able to search for things on their phones, and then they searched for things on their watches, and now I can walk into my house and I can say, hey, Google, order me a pizza. And 45 minutes later, I have a pizza. And that's because the Google search engine was robust, and it was able to move on to all of those different platforms over the years. So I will just end by saying, we don't all have to be experts in accessibility. Obviously, you're not going to be expert in the 15 minutes fire hose of information I just gave you. We don't have to be experts, but we all need to care. We need to take the time, and we need to think about it and ask ourselves these questions. You can learn how to do those basic checks. You can make sure you're creating accessible content. You can learn about accessibility settings in the different hardware and applications that you use, and you can watch for more ways to get involved. And that is my segue to introduce Chris, who is going to be talking about the next steps for how you can get involved. Uh-oh. There. Is that where you are?
Is this one on?
Just push the button on the left. Hold it down. Don't turn screen.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to go fairly quickly so that we can get you all out of here on time. So I'm here to talk about next steps, but first I have a couple thank yous to give. So I appreciate everybody here who's been engaged and been present. I think that's a great thing to start with. The leaders of IDEA have helped us put together this content and kind of keep us in the right, going the right direction. I definitely want to thank Emily. I found that very educational. It helps, I think, build empathy and understanding for what people go through when they're using our products and tools. The Accessibility Working Group. So this was really side jobs for everybody to put this together. That includes Tara, Madeline, John Redder, Angel Harp, and Jennifer Walton. They put a lot of time in this and extra effort. So you should thank them. The next part is around the next steps. So this is just the beginning, right? So we get the information out there. We need to work together to figure out what we're going to do. So we're going to go slow. This isn't a program with a lot of funding, and we're going to figure it out together. I've already been asked, well, how am I going to find time to build all these accessible features into our application? We haven't decided that. We're going to work together to figure out the appropriate scope that we can manage. And you know, so if you think about what's expected of you, it's to incorporate accessibility into your work, whatever your role is within IT. And be a voice for accessibility. You know, that's asking questions and bringing it up and helping remind people, as this is maybe a new concept if we look at it from an IT-wide perspective. And there will be processes. So I'll talk about those in a minute. Please learn how to engage those processes as they get created. I'm excited to see what we can achieve together with this. So How will IT as a division support this work? We are going to allow time for training resources. We will put together a list with online tutorials and things, and we will break it out by different job types because not everything is going to be applicable to one job type. So please be on the lookout for those resources. I'm excited to be one of the sponsors of this, and the approach that I think we're going to do next is to get representatives, a representative from each group in IT, and we're going to call that group the Accessibility Learning Leaders. And we want that group to be people who are interested and excited about learning in this area and become the kind of the next level of expertise within IT. And the goal then, by having one from every team, is they take the learnings back to their team and help incorporate it into every team. We need to build a lot of processes and services around this. And we had some good examples today that show where we, I think, can talk about it and just have a clear step-by-step of how somebody who wants to engage IT can get an accessible service. We will figure out the scope, and it will be a slow and steady pace. You know, it may be, if I think of what Emily said, we may be moving from, you know, thoughts to beliefs this year, that kind of a thing. Okay, accessibility learning leaders, the next step. I talked about this, working on improving some cross-team processes. If you're interested, let your manager know. Future scope, so just a couple minutes here. Obviously, we want to improve IT's accessibility for our services. We want to apply standards for our applications. Doesn't matter whether we build or buy them. Evaluate purchases. We want to build accountability into the project management lifecycle, so that's the way to make it stick, is to use process there. And then the last slide, continuing regular IT education, so this won't be the last thing. That group can kind of work on that too. We want to eventually build not only the IT division ownership and kind of ongoing commitment, but we want to engage all county departments too. So that's a little bit longer term. That's the last slide. I'm going to hand it over to Madeline.
Great, thank you very much. So we want to end on time. We have 2 minutes. So at the entrance, you all got a piece of paper like this. I hope you have not yet torn it, but that's okay. Yeah. Okay, you got a piece of paper like this. I have to put this mic down. I'm going to talk anyway. So we want to know, uh-oh. It's fine. Does anybody still need one? So yeah, first we want to make sure everybody has one. We want to find out how well we did at answering the 4 questions that we started with. And it's okay if we didn't do so well, because as Chris said, this is the beginning. We want to find out where we are on these 4 questions. So what I'd like you to do is tear along the dotted lines to indicate your choice for each question. So this is our evaluation, and you don't need a pen. Low tech. And when you're done, oh, beautiful. Oh, she did it backwards. That's okay. That's okay. So that's the last thing to do. When you're done, please leave it at the entrance exit. Put it in that envelope. Thanks for coming today. We had a lot of fun. I got it. Oh. Come